Hey, it's Haley. Did you think that the drama ended when I graduated from school? Huh, as if. Drama seems to have a way of finding me. When it came to my swing club friends, then our dreams took us in different directions. Anna and Kurt off to New York to further study the genres of music they loved, while me and Phil moved to the bright lights of LA and enrolled at college there. Being in LA was amazing, but hard work. Not only was it difficult trying to make it in the music industry, in a place where everyone else seemed to want to do the same thing, but I saw my ex-boyfriend Eric and the girl he left me for, Clara, everywhere. On billboards, in magazines, on TV, and so on. But anyway, luckily Phil managed to get us a couple of gigs in coffee shops and a couple of bars. We always gave it our best shot, even when the venue was mostly empty or full of drunks. We persevered, but it was hard work, and the money from gigs barely left me with any change after I'd paid for rent and expenses. Phil was making more money on the side by selling some of his songs, so he insisted on funding the majority of our work stuff. That made me feel so bad, but I had no other choice, so I could only try to work even harder, hoping I would soon be able to help out too, so Phil wouldn't have to carry the team by himself anymore. Then this one time, when we finished our set in this swanky lounge that we performed at every Thursday, the manager came over to us and said to me,
"Great show as usual, guys, but Haley, could you spice up your wardrobe a bit? You've been rotating the same 3 dresses for weeks now. I think our guests are finding it a little boring."
I was taken aback by this. It was so humiliating. I didn't know how to reply, so I forced a smile. Then Phil chimed in.
"Got it. Haley will be in a brand new dress next week."
This seemed to satisfy the manager, as he nodded at us, then left. I turned to Phil. "Why did you say that? We're going to record a new song next week, remember? I'm still saving money for the recording. How can I afford a dress?" Then Phil smiled and patted my shoulder.
"Don't worry, I've got it. I just received my royalty payment. Let's go to the mall, shall we?"
Then he dragged me along. I know Phil meant well, but to be honest, I felt really bad about it all. Phil was doing really well, while I was so low on funds, I couldn't even afford a new outfit without help from him. Jeez, when did I become so useless? As we walked to the mall, Phil bombarded me with questions about the type of dress I wanted. Did I want it long or short? Satin? Sequins? I couldn't feign enthusiasm, not when I felt so bummed out about it all. Sensing my mood, he asked,
"Hey, Haley, what's wrong? I said to not worry about money. I'll buy this for you."
I replied, "No, it's just, I feel so bad for you. I'm like some sort of burden weighing you down, while you obviously could do well on your own. I'll understand if you want to go solo." He was silent for a minute, but then he put his arm around me and said,
"I'm sorry, Haley. I never thought about it like that before. I don't pity you or anything. I'm helping you because you're my friend, okay? And I know you'd do the same for me."
I guess he had a point. Friends helped each other out. And of course, I would have done the same for him if the tables were turned. Then he said something I wasn't expecting to hear.
"Besides, those songs I've sold make me feel like I'm giving away a part of my soul. They're not what I want to write. They're purely to make money. Meanwhile, I collab with you because we have the same tastes. And your voice is awesome. Our time will come. I truly believe it."
Hearing his words lightened up my heart. I felt so grateful that I had Phil, and like him, I believed our work would pay off in the end. And it sure did. Our time did come, and much sooner than we expected. One late night, me and Phil were struggling to come up with the lyrics for a song in our studio. Well, to be exact, it's just a small corner in Phil's room. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Anna, and as soon as I picked up, she screamed, "Congrats! OMG! Why didn't you tell me?" She was so loud, I held the phone away from my ear, then said, "Tell you what, Anna, calm down. You haven't heard? Your song, Memories. It's right here, a number 8 on iTunes chart. Check it out right now." Are you sure it's not someone else's song? Don't prank me. You know it's not a funny joke. Haley, will you just go and see for yourself? Phil quickly searched for it on his laptop, and turns out it's real. Wow, our song really was in the charts. We all screamed at the top of our lungs. It felt so amazing. Kurt's congratulation text came right after. I knew our plays count had been increasing, but I didn't imagine our names on the iTunes chart. This was just the beginning. Soon, loads of record labels got in contact with us, including some big ones. It was all so overwhelming. Everything happened all at once. But as thrilled as we were, me and Phil had to tell each other to keep cool and really think this through, because this was a big decision that would change our lives. After a lot of deliberation, we signed with Daystar Records. It's a small, newly established record label. Dean, the CEO, is quite young, but he's a talented man who had worked for many big labels, and we believe he understood our vision the most. We'd chosen to put passion first, over the ambition for instant money and fame. And our new beginning with Daystar immediately hit the news the day we signed the contract. Both our families and our friends from Swing Club flooded us with congratulation messages. Finally! Dreams do come true! I still couldn't believe this. The first day we actually went to work at Daystar Records as their artists, I kid you not, I literally skipped all the way there. Dean was waiting at the door to greet us. Then he showed us around and introduced us to everyone. Apart from different practice rooms, we were also given a small studio of our own. Now Phil had a place for his equipment and to properly produce his songs. Dean even got us some performance spots on a couple of TV shows and organized some interviews. These really helped our fan base to increase, and people started to recognize us in the street. It was so crazy. I was just a normal girl with a love of music. And now I had actual fans. Once, I was in the vocal booth practicing my lines when I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to see a member of staff was holding a huge bouquet of purple peonies, my favorite flower. I opened the card. Haley, like these flowers, you've bloomed. Please never forget how enchanting your voice is, and never let go of your dreams. I know you'll reach the top. I believe in you. I flipped the card over, but there was no name on it. Maybe they were from my mom, and she'd forgotten to put her name on them? Or maybe they were from a fan. Either way, I was deeply touched. I kept the card in my purse as a reminder to keep moving forward, for myself and for the people who were supporting and believing in me. The next few months whizzed by, and I was happy with where my life was going in the City of Angels. There was one thing bugging me, though. It was probably nothing, but Dean was making me a little on the uncomfortable side. It was small things, really, such as, if he knew I was in the practice room, he'd bring me coffee. And on the days I left work late, he'd text me asking if I got home okay. He even suggested getting a folding bed for the studio, so I could stay there if I wanted to. Yeah, I know, he was probably just being nice. But he's a married man. I just see him as a big brother. I felt really awkward and uncomfortable every time he acted like this around me. I didn't want to cross any line, so I thought it best to distance myself from him as much as possible. But then there was this album release party for an A-list singer, and Dean wanted me and Phil to tag along. This was huge! I knew a lot of other celebrities would be there, and this would be a great chance for us to expand our circle in the industry. I jumped in excitement and took Phil's arm. Oh my God, we have to... Then Phil spoke up to Dean. I think I'll pass. You should take Haley with you. I'm not into that kind of noisy party. Sorry. I'd rather go finish this song I'm working on. I'll send you the demo soon. Then Dean replied, I understand. I'm not too keen on these parties either, but it works for me, you know. Then he turned to me. I'll pick you up from here. Tomorrow at 8, okay? I was taken aback. No way. I wouldn't go if Phil didn't. I mean, it would be so awkward if just me and Dean went there. So I quickly replied, I don't think I can go either, as I just remembered I have an appointment tomorrow. I'll join you next time. I forced a smile. Dean stared at me for a second, with confusion in his eyes, before he said, Oh, that's such a pity. This could be a great chance for you guys. Tell me if you change your mind, okay? Then he left. Well, yeah, of course I had 0 appointments. and I was bummed out at missing the party. But I didn't feel comfortable around Dean. And, there probably will be another chance soon. But then later that day, when I was about to go home, I heard someone calling me from behind.
Haley, wait up! I have something to tell you.
Oh no, that sounded like Dean. Gosh, what did we have to talk about? Hey, it's Haley. In the last part of my story, I moved to LA with Phil, and after a tricky start, we were finally noticed. Now, we're signed to a record label and have a boss, Dean. My dreams were starting to come true. Well, apart from the fact that Dean was making me feel a little uncomfortable, so I made up an excuse not to go to this A-list party with him. I was on my way home when I heard Dean shouting after me. Oh no, what did he want to say to me? This couldn't be good. Could it? I pretended that I hadn't heard him and kept on going. He was so persistent though, and followed after me, continuing to call my name. I ended up turning around and saying, Dean, what's the matter? If it's not so important now, can we talk later? I really need to get home. I looked down at my watch. He replied,
Wait, Haley, why are you avoiding me?
While I was faltering and didn't know how to answer, he continued,
1 minute you're jumping up and down in excitement about the party, but then when Phil said he wasn't going, your mood changed. Is it because you don't want to go with me?
I sputtered in a small voice.
Hey, Haley, are you thinking I have bad thoughts in my mind or something?
He burst out laughing.
Oh no, I'm a happily married man. Come, let's talk.
He waved me over to a nearby bench.
You have nothing to worry about. I'm just looking out for you, as I feel like I didn't manage to do that for my sister, Ellen.
He gave a thoughtful sigh.
She was a musical genius. Not only was her voice the most powerful one I've ever heard, but she could play multiple instruments. But she didn't tell me about her leukemia. Turns out, she was hiding it for years, as she didn't want us to worry. That was our Ellen, always putting others first.
I was stunned and didn't know what to say. I felt so foolish for misunderstanding Dean. There I was, thinking he was being over-familiar, when all he was actually doing was trying to look out for me, because he saw me as a sister. I muttered out, I'm sorry, while I patted his shoulder to comfort him. Looking up at me, he said,
It's okay. It was a long time ago, and I'm sorry that I made you feel uncomfortable. You have a beautiful voice, and you remind me so much of Ellen. She didn't get a chance to fulfill her dreams. But you can, and I want to help you, as I know that's what Ellen would want me to do.
He smiled gently.
So, are you going to come to the party?
He asked. Smiling, I said, Yes! Only Phil the Fool would want to miss this. This is so exciting. I felt so much better, now that my misunderstanding with Dean had been resolved, although I did cringe when I thought about how I'd been toward him. Anyway, I had a party outfit to plan. You wouldn't want to be underdressed at events like this, right? The night after, I wore my favorite dress and arrived outside of the company to meet Dean, feeling both excited and nervous. This would be the first time I got to get in contact with real celebrities. I'm talking A-list singers, probably even Hollywood movie stars, people that you would only see on TV. When we arrived at the main entrance to the party, the gate opened automatically. Wow, the driveway alone was bigger than the street I lived on. Then I spotted the mansion and a whole lot of supercars.
Pretty impressive, huh?
Dean grinned at me. I smiled back. You could say that. I was about to attend a lavish party in Beverly Hills, in the biggest mansion I'd ever seen. That's a first, for sure. It was like a dream that you never wanted to end. Dean led me around and introduced me to loads of different people, but suddenly I caught sight of a familiar figure. I tried to look carefully. Wait, wasn't that Clara?
Speaking of her, well, I've been trying to get her and Eric out of my mind for a long time, which wasn't easy when they were both super famous. I had to see news about them everywhere, whether it's about what they wore today, what's their schedule next week, or when their stupid duet hit the chart. Trust her to be here. Ugh. But wait, if Clara was here, then would Eric be here too? Oh no, I really didn't want to meet him at this time. I was lost in thought when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Startled, I turned around and saw that it was Dean. He handed me this fancy-looking cocktail and asked me if I was okay. That's when Clara appeared in front of us and started air-kissing Dean. He was about to introduce me to Clara when she stopped him. Oh, is it you, Haley? Now that you're having a go at being a celebrity, you probably don't remember me anymore. She smirked. Huh? You two already know each other? Dean asked. Yeah, we know each other very well, right? Then she winked at me. But uh-oh, seems like I picked the wrong moment to bother you. So you two, realizing what she was insinuating, Dean said, Come on now, you've also met Jane, my wife. Don't make fun of that. She rolled her eyes and said ironically, Oh, yeah, I forgot. It's just that you two look so loving. Eric never dares to be so intimate with me in public. I'm so jealous. Then she smirked and walked away. Dean told me not to take any notice of what Clara said, as she's known for being shrewd. Even though I was quite annoyed with Clara's rude words, what bothered me most at that time was not her, but Eric. Why did she intentionally mention his name in front of me? While Dean was talking to some big business types, I stepped out onto the balcony to get some fresh air. From there, I could see clearly the iconic Hollywood sign. Then I turned around to look at the bustling room, where all the well-dressed celebrities were laughing and talking. I took a deep breath and thought to myself, Look at that, Haley. You did it. This was what you've been dreaming of. That's right. I've worked so hard to get here. It's a brand new chapter now, and the ghosts from the past wouldn't be able to hold me down anymore. That encounter with Clara had actually changed my mindset quite a lot, instead of ruining my night. From then onward, I felt like I was uncovering a new source of motivation. I buried myself in work. I worked for my family, my friends, for fans who were always supporting me, and for myself. And then finally came the day when my hard work paid off. That day, Phil and I were going through some demo tracks to pick out one to be our next single, when suddenly, my phone rang. It was Dean. He said that Phil and I had been invited to perform at Blue Moon Festival. Oh my God, this was incredible! It's the famous Blue Moon that I've watched and read about for all my life. I'd get to stand on the same stage my idols had performed on. What could be better than that? I was so excited, I jumped up and down and then hugged Phil. However, my mood dampened when I found out who else was performing there. Eric! It felt like my heart had stopped beating for a few seconds as I stared at the laptop screen, emotionlessly. Phil seemed to realize that there was something wrong. He immediately looked at the lineup and was quiet at first. Then he said, Haley, I get it. You know, we don't have to do this festival. It's true that even though it had been a long time, I still felt a pang of sadness whenever I thought about Eric. However, I couldn't turn this opportunity down. That wouldn't be fair on Phil, or on myself. So I smiled at Phil and said, It's okay. I wouldn't miss it for the world. D-Day arrived. I was super excited and also terrified that I felt like I was gonna puke, which would have been bad, as I was in a swanky van en route there. My nerves were partly because I was going to perform in front of the largest audience ever, but also because I would have to be in the same place as Eric. I shook my head to shatter that thought and reassured myself that with so many artists, the chance of me having to see him again was very low. After an amazing performance, I felt electric. I'd done it. I was so proud of myself and of Phil. We were the dream team. We were walking backstage when I felt someone pull on my arm. I turned around,
and saw that it was Eric. Without saying a word, I pushed him away and carried on, but he once again pulled on my arm. Phil turned back, and on seeing what was happening, he immediately intervened.
"Hey, let go of her!"
Eric said.
"I just want to talk to Haley in private."
Phil said sharply.
"Just say it out loud. The two of us are one now. Haley's story is mine too."
Annoyed, Eric replied.
"It's not your place to say that. You're nothing to her. Haley, please listen to me."
The situation seemed to be growing more and more complicated, and the last thing any of us needed was to cause a scene here. So I told Phil to go to the green room first. Then I turned to Eric, and in a cold voice I said, "Okay, Eric, what do you want?" Hey, it's Haley. So my dreams of becoming a big star were finally starting to come true. Me and Phil had just performed at the Blue Moon Festival, and the crowd loved us. I was buzzing from the performance when Eric appeared. Ugh! He was the last person I wanted to talk to, but I didn't want Phil and him to end up fighting, so with reluctance, I agreed to hear Eric out. He smiled at me and said,
"Haley, it's so good to see you. You look fantastic."
I grumbled, "Just cut to the chase. I don't have time." He then continued,
"I know it must have been hard for you. I'm sorry for that."
I folded my arms and rolled my eyes. I was so mad. It's been over a year, and he still has never had the decency to explain to me what went wrong between us. We didn't even have a proper breakup. He just went off with that Clara girl. I couldn't take it anymore, so I blurted out, "Just stop! I don't need this. Instead, why don't you just tell me why you cheated on me?" Eric fell silent and just stared at the ground. I let out a sigh and continued, "See? You can't even excuse yourself. Eric, you're nothing more than a coward, and you don't deserve me." Then I left him standing there alone and went to the green room. Upon seeing me walking through the door, Phil hurried over to me and asked if I was okay. I forced a smile and told him everything was fine. I sat down in the corner of the room and tried to hold back my tears. I guess I wasn't fine after all. Instead, seeing Eric had restirred all of my feelings and emotions toward him. Then a staff member appeared in front of me with a huge bouquet of purple peonies. She told me that they'd been sent in for me. So I thanked her and eagerly read the note. But just like the last bunch that I'd received at the studio, there was no name on the card. Just a message. This one read, "Haley, reach for the skies and continue to dazzle like the true star you are." Suddenly, Eric popped into my mind. Could he be the one who sent these flowers? I mean, except for my family, only he knew that purple peonies were my favorite. And why here? Why now? This bouquet of peonies appeared again when Eric was around, but that would make no sense. We're over, and he'd even cheated on me with Clara, who he was still with. Ugh, my mind was messing with me. On the journey home, I stared out of the window and daydreamed about Eric, the flowers, and why he just stood there in silence. I knew I shouldn't waste my time with him, as I had better things to do. But it was so hard. Following on from the success of the festival, Phil and I were mentioned online, alongside other famous artists. It was kinda cool, but also kinda awkward seeing our faces on the internet. I guess it'd take some getting used to. Phil suggested we should take advantage of this publicity and start working on our first album right away. He also thought it'd be a good idea for me to input my creativity into it by having a go at writing songs. I'd never written a song before, so I was unsure. Phil was the composer, not me. But then Phil said something that made me change my mind.
"Haley, I know you're still upset about everything that happened with Eric, so why don't you try to channel that hurt into your music? The most moving songs come from the heart."
Phil was right. I'd been bottling up my emotions for so long, maybe it was time I let them out. So, we started working on the album. We didn't want to rush it, so the plan was to release a few singles to keep the fans interested and eager for more, while we spent the next year working on it. Then one day, Swing Club contacted us and asked us to perform at their 20th anniversary party. This was so exciting. I owed so much to Swing Club. They also informed us that Eric had agreed to come too, and that he was bringing Clara along. Well, I guess it was inevitable. On the plus side, Anna and Kurt told me they were going. Yay! It would be awesome to see them. Being back at my old school was weird, but in a good way. Suddenly, I was hit with all those memories. The last time I was here, I was just a teenager with these crazy big dreams of becoming a singer. And now look at me. My dreams had finally come true. Then we walked into the Swing Club rehearsal room. Wow, it hadn't changed at all. I instantly had this warm feeling. It felt like I was home. I saw all the younger students had gathered around Eric and Clara and were asking for their autographs. Then I spotted some of my former classmates. They were standing at the other end of the room and giving Eric and Clara dirty looks, as they were the ones who knew exactly what went on between me and Eric back then. Phil and I went over to them, and as soon as they saw us, the girls, Anna among them, screamed with joy and immediately ran towards us, and we all did a big group hug. Kurt and the boys were standing behind and greeted us too. It was so great to see them all again. Turns out, some goofy love from my friends was just what I needed. Eric spotted us and walked over with a huge smile on his face. Kurt then said out loud, "Let's stand somewhere else, guys. There's a strong scent of cheater around here. Makes me want to puke." Then he walked off, and everyone followed. Not knowing what to do, I just stood there, staring at Eric. To be honest, I felt a little bit bad for him. Anna seemed to figure out what I was thinking, as she dragged me along and said, "Let's go, Haley. This jerk's only getting what he deserves." I knew my friends meant well, but I didn't mean to make anyone pick sides. Okay, I knew what Eric did to me wasn't great. Still, I didn't want to see him being treated like this. Anyway, I knew I couldn't think like this now, as I had a performance to prepare for. The anniversary concert was amazing. It felt so good being back on the stage, in the place where it all began. Afterward, I went outside and sat down on a bench in the garden to catch some fresh air. It was a bit chilly, and I started shivering. Suddenly, I felt someone put a jacket over my shoulders and say, "You never know how to take care of yourself, huh?" I turned around and saw that it was Eric. Our eyes met, and it felt awkward. I didn't want anything to do with him anymore, so I gave him back his jacket and walked past him. But suddenly, he grabbed my arm and said, "Please wait. Can we talk for a minute?" I replied, "There's nothing to talk about." He was about to say something when suddenly Clara showed up and said, "Well, well, what do we have here? If you keep clinging on to her like that, others might think you're having an affair with her." I was startled and quickly yanked my arm away, then stepped back. Clara continued, "That's better now. You know, Haley, he has a girlfriend, so you shouldn't be so flirty." Eric grabbed my hand and tried dragging me away. Ugh, all these physical contacts were giving me mixed feelings. Why couldn't he and his annoying girlfriend just leave me alone? Then luckily, Phil showed up and said, "Hey, jerk, let her go!" Eric glared angrily back at Phil and said, "Excuse me, but who are you to say that?" Then Phil pulled me back to his side, and the two of them had a stare-off. Clara, who was clearly annoyed that no one was paying her any attention, looked at Eric and said in an ironic voice, "Babe, they're superstars now. We shouldn't mess with them." And then she tried to lock arms with him, but Eric just pushed her away. That made her even more frustrated, so she turned to me and Phil and continued, "Congratulations on your big success. You both worked hard. Or maybe it was just Phil. I mean, without his songs, you'd be nothing." Irritated, I mumbled, "Watch your mouth, Clara." But she didn't care, and turned to Phil saying, "Oh, Phil, you should have let me sing your songs. I bet they would have been #1 on Billboard, or even won Song of the Year. But no, you've wasted them on her. What a pity." Oh God, I hated her. Why did she always have to act like such a diva? I was going to give her a piece of my mind when suddenly Eric spoke up.
Don't be ridiculous. Haley is really talented, and her voice skills are perfect.
Then Phil added,
Haley is beginning to compose some pretty awesome songs. Also, her voice complements my music perfectly, while you two only get attention because of your dating rumors.
Well, Phil's last comment left Eric and Clara speechless. Then Phil led me inside. Clara just flipped her hair and said, "Let's go, babe," and walked away. But Eric didn't follow her. It was all so confusing. Why had he stood up for me against Clara? She was his girlfriend, right? So why would he treat her like that in front of us? Something was up, definitely. But I had no time to let it bother my mind. It's best to stay away from them, I guessed. The next day, Phil and I headed back to LA to continue our work. For months, Dean had been talking about hosting a mini show for us, and finally the plan was coming together. And the show would be called Haley and Phil, Our Journey Begins. It was exciting, as this was our first mini show ever. We rehearsed day and night for it, hoping to bring flawless performances to our fans. The day of the mini show arrived swiftly, and everything was going great as planned. But then, there was a small problem. There was nobody else backstage to help me zip my dress. Oh no, this was really urgent. I had to get on stage right now. Then Dean appeared to see where I was, so I awkwardly asked him for help. As he zipped up my dress, a camera flashed. What was that? Did somebody just secretly take a picture of me? I turned to Dean and gave him an anxious look. Then he ran outside to see who it was. But the corridor was empty. Hey, it's Haley again. So, as amazing as being famous is, it also comes with some problems. The first one being Eric. Having a famous ex around is awkward. Secondly, it's all the unknowns that being in the public eye brought with it. For instance, I was currently backstage at my first mini show, terrified, because I was pretty sure someone just took a picture of me in an unzipped dress. I worriedly looked at Dean. Did you see who that was? Why would someone take those kind of pictures? Oh no, what if they sell them to the press? Dean gave me a reassuring look and said,
Don't worry, I promise I'll definitely find out who did it. Now, please relax, as your performance is in any minute, and you wouldn't want to let this affect it, right?
Then I watched him leave. What he said made sense. This was an important show for me and Phil, so I couldn't mess things up. When I was on the stage, I pushed all my worries to the side and concentrated on what I did best, singing my heart out. Afterward, we hung around and had a little fan meeting. It was crazy being around people that knew my name and wanted selfies with me. Phil was getting plenty of attention too. It seemed he was a hit with the fangirls. I heard them saying how handsome they thought he was, and so cool. Phil may have kept a straight face, but I knew he liked it really. I mean, come on, who wouldn't? Then, someone even shouted that Phil and I made a beautiful couple. Phil almost burst out laughing, and I just smiled shyly. Then one girl asked me if I had any plans besides singing. I didn't know how to answer, as I'd never thought about doing anything besides singing before.
You should be a vlogger, one girl suggested. Or you could be in movies,
another said. Oh, that didn't sound too bad. Thinking about it, trying something new alongside my singing might help promote our music and increase my popularity. It was definitely something to consider, thanks to my awesome fans. Then, as luck would have it, I found out that a famous director was holding auditions for a supporting role in his project. It was a perfect chance for beginners like me to learn from these veteran actors. Besides, it wouldn't take much time, so I could still have time for music. So I immediately signed up to participate. The day of the casting arrived, and I was excited, but also really worried. The last time I'd attended an audition was during my freshman year of swing club. Wow, time sure does fly. I was sitting in the waiting room when I saw a familiar face sitting in the corner. It was Eric. He must have been trying out for a part too. Suddenly, our eyes met, but I immediately avoided his gaze. My heart began to skip a beat, and it wasn't due to nerves. It was down to seeing him. Even after all this time, he still had that effect on me. Sigh. Before I could decide whether I should go and say hi to him or not, a very hot guy walked over to me. I recognized him from a few hit movies and knew he was a big deal. He smiled at me and said, "Are you Haley? As in, the singer?" I nodded back, awestruck that this super famous guy knew who I was. He sat down next to me and asked me if I was worried about my audition. I told him I was a bit, so he started telling me about some of his previous auditions and experiences. At first, it was great hearing this stuff from a pro, but then he asked me if I wanted to hang out with him on the weekend. I started to feel a bit uncomfortable because of his flirty behaviors, but I didn't know how to politely say no. I tried to avoid his eyes while thinking of an excuse, and suddenly, I thought of Eric, so I glanced over in his direction, but he'd gone. Meanwhile, that actor guy started to move closer to me, wrapped his arm around my shoulder, and stroked my hair. I kind of started to panic. Then suddenly, I felt someone grabbing my hand and pulling me away. Turns out, it was Eric. What was he doing? Eric pulled me to the balcony at the end of the hallway. I glared at him. What was that for? I'm not yours to drag to places whenever you want. He replied,
I don't like you chatting with other guys, especially not slimeballs like him.
I felt my heart beating faster, but I tried to keep my cool as I replied, You have no say in who I can and can't talk to. We're not even friends. Eric looked at me with sad eyes.
I'm so sorry, Haley. I don't want it to be like this. Please forgive me. I miss you.
This was so typical of Eric, winding me up before my audition. So I growled out, Sorry is no use to me. You have no idea how much you hurt me. Unexpectedly, he replied,
I will break up with Clara. Well, no. The truth is, there was nothing between me and Clara in the first place.
Ha! That sounds familiar. You must have said the same thing to Clara to be with her while you were still dating me, right? I said, then started to walk off. He replied with a low voice.
Everything was forced by the company.
I stopped on the spot and looked at him, then angrily said, Oh, you think I'll trust you again? I'm no longer the innocent girl who believes everything you say. After a moment of silence, he sighed, then told me everything. When he rose to fame and was working with Clara, she was always openly showing affection for him, even though Eric has told her to stop many times, and once she even confessed her feelings towards him. He rejected her immediately, as he was with me and didn't like her in that way. I rolled my eyes and said, Yeah, right. If you really rejected her feelings right away, then things wouldn't be this way. Eric cut off my words.
Please just listen to me first.
Then he continued.
Clara didn't take the rejection well, so she posted our photo on Instagram and spread rumors with the press that we were dating. At the time, I was furious and wanted to correct the press, but Will stopped me. He even said that our dating rumors were getting a very good response from our fans, so he told me to go along with it.
I looked straight at him and said, Okay, so there's nothing between the two of you, but you still chose to listen to the company and leave me without any explanation, right? He said,
I'm so sorry, but they promised me that it'd only be until the duet with Clara was released. Besides, they even offered to help you become famous once it's done. That's why I endured it all. I did it for you.
Whoa, this whole thing was unbelievable. I didn't expect that company to be that bad, but thank God that it turned out there was really nothing between Eric and Clara, just as I suspected. So I said, You didn't have to do that. I can stand up on my own. Then Eric smiled at me and held my hand.
Yep, I shouldn't worry so much, since my girl here is so talented. Haley, I messed up, but I did it with good intentions. Can you forgive me?
My feelings were really chaotic, surprised, happy, and guilty at the same time. As confusing as it all was, I knew that I still loved Eric. So with teary eyes, I nodded. Then he pulled me into his arms. Suddenly, I remembered one thing. I asked him, what about the bouquets? You sent me those purple peonies, right? He shyly nodded.
Yes, they were from me, so you'd know I was thinking about you.
I squeezed him tight and whispered a thank you. I couldn't believe all this, as if I just got a huge weight off my shoulders now that everything has been resolved. After that, I did my audition. I'm not sure how well it went, as my mind was elsewhere. Afterward, Eric drove me to a secluded part of the beach, and we held hands and went for a walk on the sand. I felt so happy to see the old Eric again, the real him, the one I'd fallen in love with. So, you see, Eric and I got back together. But of course, we kept it a secret from the public. Only our close friends knew about it. I told Anna and Kurt over video call, and Anna cheered, but Kurt was a bit more skeptical and told me to be careful, as once a snake, always a snake. But I didn't think much about it, as me and Eric were in our own euphoria. Everything seemed to be going well, too well. And then, something terrible happened. One day, I was having a slump while trying to compose my first song at home, so I surfed the internet for a bit, hoping to find some inspiration. Then suddenly, I saw my name trending on Twitter, so I quickly clicked on one article. The article said that I was a rude and disrespectful girl. What? They even confirmed that the news was revealed by a veteran actor in the showbiz world, but no name was given. Could it have been that actor guy from the audition? Surely, the fact that Eric suddenly pulled me away had irritated him, but he turned out to be not much of a decent guy either. And the problem is that in Hollywood, rumors have a way of sticking. As a result, a few of my advertising contracts were canceled, and so were some of our gigs. One teen magazine even called the office to tell us that they wouldn't publish my interview anymore, as I was a bad influence on their young readers. It was so embarrassing. I was struggling, but our company too had a hard time dealing with this scandal. I felt guilty, as it could affect the entire company's image, but both Dean and Phil reassured me that it would pass, and that malicious rumors came with the fame. I tried to stay strong and believe it would blow over, but then my anti-fan base grew. There were forums and hate clubs all about me. You know, even if you read 1,000 compliments, that one negative comment is the only thing that's left on your mind. I tried not to read them, but they were everywhere, saying horrible stuff about my singing, my outfits, and the way I look. One afternoon, I was lying in bed thinking, when suddenly I heard the doorbell. I feared that it was one of the anti-fans who'd come to throw paint on me or something. I peeked through the peephole and saw Eric standing there with a big hat and sunglasses. OMG! What was he doing here? I quickly opened the door and nervously looked around, then hissed at him. Eric, what are you doing here? Someone might spot you. He replied,
Haley, you're the most important person in my life. I'd trade it all for you.
His kind words made me so happy. That day, Eric cooked me a delicious meal. Then he taught me how to deal with haters and ignore the comments. I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world. But unfortunately, everything didn't stop there. Hi, it's me, Haley again. So, a chance encounter at an audition meant that I reconnected with Eric, and after he explained that his relationship with Claire was fake, we got back together. Things were going great, but then some mean, fake rumors about me started, and my anti-fan base began to grow. It was okay though because I had Eric, And being with him made me feel like the luckiest girl in the world. He went out of his way to cheer me up by surprising me with cute gifts and cooking for me. It was hard keeping our relationship a secret. I really wanted to go public with him so we could be seen together like a normal couple. For our anniversary, Eric called me up and told me that he had a surprise for me. He told me to dress up and come outside as he was waiting for me. I asked him where he was taking me, but he just laughed and said,
"Babe, just come down quickly and I'll let you know."
I got ready and rushed out to his car. There he was, dressed all smartly and looking so cute. He smiled at me and said,
"I wanted to take you out, so I've booked a private cinema room for us. It's out of the city center, so we won't be spotted."
I hugged him in excitement. I hadn't gone to the cinema since forever. And with Eric? Yay! This would be really awesome. I know. I had the sweetest, most romantic boyfriend ever. However, it wasn't long before my bubble burst. We arrived at the cinema to paparazzi everywhere. How could this be? On seeing our car, they immediately turned their cameras to us and went into a flashing frenzy. We had no choice but to cancel the date and go back home. Such a bummer. And that was scary too. How had they found out about our plan? Back at my place, we ordered pizza and watched a romantic movie. As good as it was spending time with Eric, I couldn't shake my sadness away. On sensing my mood, he patted my head and comforted me that everything would be okay, and we could date out next time. The next day, when I woke up and surfed Twitter, as expected, the news about me and Eric's relationship was everywhere. I was made to be the villain who'd gotten in the way of Eric and Clara's dreamy love story. I scanned over some of the negative comments about me. One said, "Poor Haley, beautiful voice, but a vile boyfriend thief." And another said, "Is Eric blind? Clara's so much prettier than her. I guess he must like mean girls." The whole thing sucked, and I felt dreadful. I wasn't a boyfriend stealer, nor was I a rude or horrible person. Worse still, some comments made out I was two-timing Phil with Eric. Ugh! Phil and I were just friends. Now I was famous, my private life wasn't so private anymore. The world felt like they owned me and could therefore say whatever hurtful and untrue things they wanted to. It seemed the truth didn't matter, not when lies made stories. Luckily, my loyal fans were still by my side to protect and comfort me. "Haley, I'll always believe you. Haley, don't worry. We will always love you." And so on. These messages were so sweet, and they supported me a lot. Right, I just needed to focus on working and composing songs for my next album. My talent and effort would be the best comeback to all the haters. Indeed, after a few weeks, everything settled down. However, it wasn't long before another storm came. One night, I was at a party to celebrate the new product launch of the cosmetic brand I represent. Of course, there were a bunch of celebs and paparazzi at the party. Even Eric attended. Because of the recent rumors, we just smiled and then chatted with other guests. I also saw Clara. She was talking to Jane, Dean's wife. On seeing me, Clara just smirked and looked away. But whatever, she could be that way if she wanted. While I was talking to the brand representative, I saw Jane coming over to me with a glass of wine in her hand. I thought she wanted to say hi to me or something, so I turned and smiled at her. But then I realized that she looked quite angry. She pulled out a photo and yelled at me. "Say it! What happened between you and my husband?" Confused, I looked at the photo. Oh no, it was the one where Dean was zipping up my dress at the mini show. It was completely innocent. But the picture made us both look so guilty. "Who gave you this pic? It's not what you think. He just helped me." Without letting me finish my sentence, she shouted angrily. "How dare you seduce my husband? Aren't you in a relationship with Eric? Or Phil or something? It seems that you dare to do everything to be famous, right?" I tried explaining it to her, but she was too angry to listen. I asked her to go somewhere else more private to talk, as there were many people here, but this made her more furious, and she yelled at me that I was the third wheel who stole her husband. We immediately caught the attention of everyone at the party. They gathered around us and kept pointing at us and whispering. She glared at me as she said, "It's time girls like you were taught a lesson." I saw that she was about to splash her wine over me, so I quickly covered my face with my hands. But at that point, someone appeared in front of me. I looked up and saw Eric with a wine-soaked face. Oh no! I was confused and didn't know what to do next. This was out of control. Then Clara appeared, grabbed Jane's hand, and told her to calm down and think about how this would affect Dean's career. They both left after that. I grabbed a napkin and tried to wipe Eric's face, but he shrugged me away and told me to go home before things worsened. I hesitated a bit, but I knew he was right. This night was a disaster. Feeling so confused and upset, I went to the studio instead of coming back home. It was late, so there was no one there. I curled up on the couch and thought about things. The entertainment industry was so harsh. I just gained a bit of popularity, but a series of false scandals had already come up. After a while, I decided to text Eric. I felt really guilty about what had happened tonight and wanted to say sorry to him, but there was no reply. Maybe he was busy or something, I thought. I decided to wait for him to call me back. I must have fallen asleep as I woke up to Phil's voice.
"Haley? What are you doing here? Are you okay? You didn't answer my calls."
I looked at my phone and saw dozens of missed calls and texts from Dean and Phil, but none from Eric. Then Dean also arrived and asked me to tell him everything that had happened last night. Afterward, he said that he'd talk to Jane and explain what really happened. And of course, the scandal had made the headlines. However, Dean told me not to worry and that he would find out who took that photo and make everything clear. Then, Dean's phone rang. It was the cosmetic brand from last night. Apparently, my scandals negatively had affected their brand image, and customers were threatening to boycott their products, so they were canceling all association with me and were demanding compensation. Whoa, I didn't expect things to have grown this bad, this quickly. So I searched social media and saw that the hashtag about me, Haley the Third Wheel, was trending at number 1, along with loads of negative comments branding me a man-stealer and saying that they'd never listen to my music again. My world collapsed. I felt like I would never prove myself innocent. The cosmetic brand was the first of many. Next, TV shows, concerts, and magazines all phoned in canceling. I felt like I was going crazy. The whole world seemed to be turning its back on me. Daystar fell into a crisis, to say the least. However, Dean and Phil still remained on my side and said that they would make everything clear and prove me innocent. The following days, I locked myself in my room and didn't want to meet anyone. While I was lying on my bed, the phone rang, and thinking that it was Eric, I immediately answered it. Turns out, it was the manager of another entertainment company. He said,
"Move to my company. I'm sure that I can make you more famous if you become my little lover."
OMG! I couldn't believe it. I hung up angrily without saying anything. How rude he was! I burst into tears. Everything was completely beyond my stamina. My friends and family constantly called and texted me to check if I was okay. They were really kind, but I still felt sad and lonely, as there was still no news from Eric. I'd not heard as much as a word from him since the party, even though I'd texted and called him hundreds of times. It was just like 3 years ago when I was in trouble. He was nowhere to be found. The sad memories of the past few years seemed to come to life again. Had Kurt been right all along? Had Eric come back to me just for fame? Not for love? So now, when my scandals were everywhere, he immediately disappeared in order not to be involved. I didn't want to believe it, but how could I think otherwise? Anna and Kurt were in a different state, but they still rushed to LA to take care of me. Meanwhile, my so-called boyfriend who lived in the same city as me couldn't be any less bothered. I was so grateful to have Anna and Kurt there, so I told them everything that had happened between me and Eric. Anna was furious and said that Eric was just a psychopath who wanted to take advantage of my love. I sighed. Was she right? Did he just want to play with my feelings? Whatever. All of this had been too much for me. I just wanted to throw it all away and catch a break from this dramatic life, now that my friends were all here. Some days later, one night, when Anna and I were watching a film together, the phone rang. Someone said that Kurt was hospitalized because he got in a fight or something. Anna and I immediately rushed to the hospital, which was swarming with paparazzi. Huh? What was this about? Why were they here? I didn't know what was going on, but that surely couldn't be a good sign. Hello guys, it's me again, Haley. In the last episode, after saving me from a sudden tantrum of Dean's wife, Eric disappeared again with no reason and couldn't even be bothered to answer my calls. In addition, the constant wave of criticism from anti-fans made me even more depressed. Now, my career was on the rocks, along with my relationship with Eric. Worrying for me, Anna and Kurt jumped on a plane to visit and stay with me for a while to make sure I was okay. Then one night, Anna received a phone call saying that Kurt had gotten into a fight and was at the hospital. We rushed there to find the place swarming with paparazzi. Were they here for me? But how did they know that I was coming? Whatever, I needed to go check on my friend right now. On the way to Kurt's room, we passed an open door, so I peered inside. And surprisingly, I saw Eric sitting on a bed and a nurse was tending to his bloodied nose. Will and Clara were also there. He was busy on his phone. She was standing next to Eric. Immediately, Anna and I looked at each other. That explained the paparazzi mob out there. And surely it couldn't be a coincidence that both Eric and Kurt were here, right? On seeing Eric, my heart tightened. I just wanted to run over to him and be by his side, but he just turned away as soon as his eyes met mine. Sensing how I was feeling, Anna took my hand and pulled me away. When we came to Kurt's room, we hurried over to him and asked if he was okay. Fortunately, he only had a few cuts and bruises. Then I said, "Glad you're okay, Kurt. Now let's get out of here first. I don't think we should stay here for long." Right at that moment, Phil arrived. News traveled fast in Hollywood, and he'd read about the fight on the internet and came straight here to find out what had happened. We left via the back door to avoid the news-hungry reporters. Once we were safe in Phil's car, Anna grew impatient. "Now, can you tell us the whole story? What happened? I thought you were going to see your friend's band." Kurt grimaced. "Geez, let me catch a breath first. I'm starving now after all that fighting. Let's go grab something to eat. Then I'll tell you about it." Anna reluctantly nodded in agreement, so Phil drove us through a nearby drive-thru. Then, while munching on his burger, Kurt started the story. "The thing is, I was at the concert, and Eric too, as you can tell. Halfway through the show, I went to the bathroom and bumped into him, but we just ignored each other. Then as I was leaving the men's room, I heard a familiar voice down the hallway, so I stopped for a second and realized that it was Eric talking to his manager, saying, 'All right, I'll do as you wish. I'll cut things off with Haley.'" "Oh my, did he really say that?" Anna exclaimed. "Yes, that was what first popped up in my mind too." Kurt continued. "You guys, I was so mad
that I ran over to him and punched him right in his dumb face. That's how we ended up fighting. Haley, I warned you before. Eric only wants to feed off the perks of your fame. The first sign of trouble and he's off.
Anna and Phil also agreed with Kurt and showed their strong dissatisfaction with Eric. As for me, I just gazed out the window and felt so heavy-hearted. It's the same as it was years ago. And here I was, heartbroken all over again. Anna patted me on the shoulder and asked if I was okay. I laughed and said, "It's okay. I'm fine. Nothing he does surprises me anymore." Even though I'd told her that, I couldn't shake the feeling in my heart that there was more to this story. Maybe Kurt misunderstood what was said. I mean, he's always been hot-headed and somewhat hostile toward Eric. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I scrolled through my phone and reminisced on old pictures of Eric and me. We looked so happy back then. Now it was such a mess. My tears kept pouring out until I fell asleep. I woke up late in the next morning and lazily reached out for my phone. My eyes widened when I saw Anna's Instagram post. There, laid out for the world to see, was the story of Eric and me, including our blossoming love back at high school, how I'd asked his now manager to give him a chance, supported him by flying out to LA, and always being there for him when he needed me, and how in return he'd betrayed me, not once, but twice. To back this up, she'd also attached lots of pictures of Eric and me looking all loved up. Anna's post had gone viral, and there were already hundreds of comments from fans and followers. Most of them were sympathetic toward me and unkind to Eric. Then I read some of today's news stories, which exposed Eric with the headlines, "Eric the Betrayer," and "The True Face of Eric." I felt a pang in my heart. I know he messed up, but I didn't want this to happen to him. I called and messaged him immediately, but he didn't answer. OMG, why was everything so messed up? I ran to the kitchen to find Anna making coffee, as if nothing had happened. I waved the post in her face and said, "Anna, what have you done?" She just shrugged and replied, "He deserved it, Haley. I wasn't going to stand by and watch your career landslide because of that jerk. The world needs to know the truth. You can't just take this all on yourself alone." I then begged her to take the post down, and eventually she agreed to. Not that it made any difference, as everyone had already seen it. I didn't agree with what Anna had done, but I couldn't blame her for doing it. She just wanted to protect me and hated seeing me so upset. And her plan worked, as I was no longer portrayed as the villain in the media's eyes, and the number of followers on my fan pages also increased significantly. Things seemed to simmer down after a few days, and I've decided that I just needed to erase Eric out of my mind once and for all, as all these dramas have been taking up too much time for me to work on my music. But then one day, I arrived home from the studio to find Will waiting outside my apartment. He told me that he wanted to have a private talk with me about Eric. I didn't want to deal with any of this, but I didn't want to cause a public scene either, so I told him to come inside. As soon as we sat down, he glared at me and said, "I hope you're happy with yourself, as you've successfully damaged Eric's career for your own selfish needs. But remember that he's the star, not you. And unless you do something to rectify this, I will make sure you're never hired again." I was furious. How dare this man come into my home and threaten me? Okay, you can try what you like, but blaming me won't work. It's all on you. Eric told me everything. I know that you and your company forced him to date Clara. He sneered. "You silly little girl. You think Eric did it because I forced him? Obviously not. He's a grown man, and he's smart enough to know that if he denied that dating rumor, then it would affect his duet project with Clara, and also their reputation, so he just went along with it, and even asked me to help cover up this fake relationship. He chose fame, not you." I sat there speechless. I didn't want to believe what Will was saying, but how could I not? He said exactly what I doubted about. At the first sign of trouble, Eric left me and ran to Clara for his own good. And this time, history repeated itself all over again. After Will left, I felt so empty inside. Nothing, just me, staring into a void, trying to deny this reality. But what's the point? Everything was meaningless now. So, in sorrow, I went to a bar in town and started drinking in order to forget my troubles. The next thing I remember was Anna showing up. Turns out she'd called me, but I was too drunk, so the barman took the call and told her to come and pick me up. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a terrible headache. Anna was asleep on the beanbag next to me. She must have been so tired from taking care of me all night. Thank you, Anna. You're an amazing friend. I covered her with a blanket and prepared her a glass of milk with a thank you note. Then I went out for a walk to refresh my mind. I put my headphones in and let the music guide me. Before I realized it, I'd wandered over to Daystar Records. I smiled as I reminded myself why I came to LA in the first place. It was to make my singing dreams come true. I'd come so far, and that was down to hard work and determination. I couldn't give up now. I could get through this, I thought to myself, then took a deep breath of fresh morning air. But then I saw someone lying on the doorstep of the studio, clutching an empty bottle of wine. I peered down at them. Eric? Why was he here? I immediately turned around and started to walk off. I couldn't keep on letting Eric pull me down. He's just a stranger to me now. That's what my mind told me, but my body didn't listen. Before I could stop myself, I rushed back over to him and gently shook him. Hey, wake up, Eric. You'll catch a cold. He woke up, looked around, then appeared startled when he saw it was me. He looked so bad, as if he had something going on, and he had suffered a lot in a short amount of time. Then, with pleading eyes, he said,
Haley, please, I need to talk to you.
Hey, it's Haley here again. So, as you've known, Anna has told the whole world the truth about Eric and me. Now, everyone knew that he chose fame over me, and then played with my heart. A lot was going on, and I was so confused. So after a heavy night, I went for a walk to clear my head. And who should I see sleeping in front of Daystar Records but Eric? Even though Eric had just broken my heart again, I couldn't bear seeing him like this. So when he asked to have a talk with me, I softly said, "Let's get you out of here first." I helped Eric walk to the nearby park, and we sat on a bench hidden away in the corner to avoid people's eyes. Eric was still half asleep with his head between his hands, so I went to grab us some coffees. I bought him a cup of latte. How pathetic! After all the pain that he gave me, I still remembered every little fact about him, such as this one, about how he hated black coffee. So I couldn't help but let out a bitter smile thinking about it. I sat down next to Eric, handed him the coffee, and said, "Here, drink it. Then you'll be sober enough to say whatever you feel you need to." Eric took the coffee, but he started talking in a rush, as if he feared I was going to just leave.
Haley, I'm so sorry. I've been so foolish living under the control of others. Well, I should have protected you.
I didn't expect him to start off like that right away. I didn't know what to say. Eric seemed to notice my silence, so he forced a laugh to erase the tense atmosphere and carried on.
How did I even get here while being so wasted? Perhaps it's because my head is always full of you. Haley, I know nothing I do could ever make it all up for you anymore. I don't know what to do. I've run out of energy to live like this. I just want to go back to being a normal, happy teenager who just simply loves music.
Okay, this was strange, as I'd never seen Eric like this before. It's like his whole world had just collapsed at his feet. He has been defeated. I couldn't keep up my cold facade anymore, so in a soft voice I replied, "Eric,
You're a strong man. You can get through this and make it right." He looked a bit brighter as he saw me talking to him again, so I continued. "I know we viewed LA as this promised dreamland, but maybe the reality of it is different. It's ruthless out here, but I can honestly say that singing and making music with Phil during this past year has been the happiest time of my life." Eric, I don't know if you share the same feelings, but it seems like LA has turned you into someone you're not and erased the flame in your eyes. Eric looked sad as he sighed out,
Maybe it has."
Whoa, his words surprised me. What happened to the optimistic boy who believed nothing was impossible? The one who always picked me up every time I was lost and upset? That's when I realized he needed my help more than ever in this moment. So I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "Remember that music is our happy place, not our burden. When things are at their hardest for me, I turn to music. So we should never let other things ruin this pure passion of ours. Let's just put aside all the dramas and whatever's between us. I truly hope you will soon find the real you again. Make it worth it, Eric, because I don't think your 16-year-old self would have wanted you to end up like this." I could tell that my words had hit home. He sat up straight and looked far away with determination in his eyes. I'd said all I needed to say, so I gave him an encouraging smile and bid him goodbye before leaving. "Take care, Eric. I hope to read good news about you soon." That conversation to me was a good closure for our relationship. It's officially over now, no matter what the truth was. I didn't want to be bothered anymore. I've made my decision. Life must go on, and I'd rather put my heart and soul into my music. But then, news of Eric came sooner than I expected, and I'm not sure if it was good or bad. I was having dinner alone at home and channel hopping when I came across an entertainment news on TV that was talking about Eric. The anchor delivered the news that was just in that Eric wanted to terminate the contract with his company. There was even a rumor that during a meeting, he punched his manager Will. Not only that, but Eric also accused his company of interfering in his private life and forcing him to fake a relationship with Clara. I was so shocked that I dropped my bowl of salad. If he dared to let this out in public, then it must have been the truth, right? Whoa. Exposing his company like this was an extremely risky move, as they were a powerful force. Now what would he do? A few days later, Eric showed up at Daystar Records. I thought he was there to see me, but he said he needed to talk to Phil and wanted me to hear it too. I was confused. What did Eric have to say to Phil? And why did he want me to be a part of it? Eric looked exhausted, and I could see the dark circles under his eyes. He seemed hesitant, as if he didn't know where to begin. Finally, he started telling Phil and me that he wanted to terminate the contract with his company, but he needed Phil's help. Turns out, when Eric let his company know about his decision, they threatened him that if he left them, they would destroy his career path, and every song he had performed would belong to them. It meant that Eric would have to start again at the very beginning to continue following his passion for music. Wow, I knew those people were ruthless, but this was cruel. Still, I was confused as to why Eric was seeking out Phil's help. But then Eric turned to Phil and said,
"I was hoping that you'd be able to help, seeing as you composed some of my songs."
What? Phil had written songs for Eric? No one had ever told me about this. Eric continued,
"Plus, with your family's influence on the industry, my company probably won't be able to abuse their power anymore. Look, what I'm trying to say is, I know I've messed up, and I've been a jerk to you, but the truth is, I respect everything you and your family have done for the music industry. So, I've come to you as a fellow musician, asking if you can help me get copyright for those songs."
I sat there open-mouthed. Turns out, Phil is the musician who composed some of Eric's hit songs under his stage name. In fact, Phil comes from a family that has a strong position in this industry. His mom is a famous singer, and his dad is a well-known producer.
but he never mentioned it because he wanted to earn recognition from people on his own merits. I already knew that Phil also composed music for other artists, but I had no idea that he'd written some of Eric's hit songs. What a mysterious genius! With reluctance, Phil replied,
Eric, I'm sorry, but it's out of my hands, as the copyright of all those songs belonged to the record label the moment I signed the contract.
Eric couldn't hide his sad look, as he thanked Phil and said that he would figure another way out. But then he turned to me and asked if we could talk. I led him into the room next door. Eric sat down next to me and buried his head in his hands.
I'm so sorry, Haley. I've been a coward. Fame turned me into someone I don't want to be, and now I'm trying to put it right. I was so concerned with my career that I'd agreed to Will's ludicrous demands.
He looked at me with sad eyes, then continued.
I naively believed him when he said I only needed to pretend to date Clara for a short time. A week turned into another week, then a month, and there's no excuse for how I treated you. I lost true love for fake fame, and I will be forever regretful of this.
As I listened to Eric, I didn't feel angry toward him anymore. Instead, I sympathized with him. Will manipulated him. He was nothing but a puppet for him to control as he saw fit. But there was one thing I couldn't figure out, so I asked Eric, after the party and the incident with Dean's wife Jane, why did you just vanish like that? He took my hand and said,
Clara was jealous, so she hired people to stalk you, and one of them took that photo of you and Dean. Then Clara showed it to Jane to cause a fuss. I knew she was behind it, so I confronted her. Only, she seemed proud of her actions. She told me if I didn't cut all contact with you, she'd share that picture on the internet, and she'd make it her mission to turn the world against you.
Sighing, I said, Eric, you should have been honest with me. He said,
I know. I'm sorry, Haley. It wasn't just Clara. It was Will, too. He told me that he would do anything in his power to destroy your career if I continued to see you. Besides, I thought you'd be better off without me. All I've done is caused you pain, and unintentionally damage your career, when all I ever set out to do was protect you.
I was touched, but angry at Eric at the same time by what he told me. I had no clue that Eric had to bear all those pressures alone, just to protect me. He had even been hitted by Kurt. I choked, trying to speak up. Idiot! They can start whatever ridiculous rumors they like about me, but they can never threaten my career. But Eric forced a smile.
I know. You're an unstoppable force. I'm glad you finally know the whole truth. I hope one day you can find a way to forgive me.
It felt good to have cleared the air, but so much had happened between us, and I wasn't ready to move on from that. So I hugged him, wished him the best, and told him that I needed time. The most important thing for Eric right now was to escape from his evil company's control, and I wanted to help him do this if I could. Will was a big name in the industry, and he had a lot of powerful connections, so leaving wouldn't be easy for Eric, as Will would go out of his way to make sure that no other companies would work with him again. Eric and I parted on good terms, and I wished him all the best. Now, it was time for me to focus on myself. Well, that was the plan. But then about a week after that, I was on my way to an event I was performing at, and scrolling through my phone when I saw there was breaking news regarding Eric. Hey, it's Haley here. I'm finally back with the last part of my story. Thank you guys for staying with me up until now. So, I finally knew the truth about Eric and why he treated me the way he had. It was all down to his manipulative boss, Will. Now, he was desperate to break free from his evil company and make music his own way. I was en route to perform at a charity concert when I saw that everyone was tweeting about an interview with Eric that was currently streamed live on YouTube, so I quickly tuned in, as I had spare time to kill anyway. The host was asking him to address the rumors of him wanting to leave his company due to some conflicts, Eric forced a smile, then spoke up.
I've always wanted to be a singer. The thought of turning my passion into a career was my dream. The problem with dreams is that they don't always turn out as envisioned, especially when working with a company with different views to mine. For me, it's always been about the music. But unfortunately, I've lost sight of that during the past. So, in light of this, I have decided to leave my current management company. Even though I'm encountering a lot of trouble coming to an agreement on this with the company, I'll leave no matter what it takes. I want to become an artist who will leave a legacy, earned from hard work and talent, not from scandals and shocking news stories. So to my fans, to people who support me, everyone, please wait a little bit more for a brand new Eric. I definitely won't let you down.
Wow! He'd found the strength to put the truth out there in his own words. Throughout the interview, he also unfolded some other manipulative things that the company had done to him. The comment section also went so crazy that I couldn't even catch a glimpse of what everyone was saying. I could only hope they were all positive reactions. And from now on, there was no going back for him anymore, only forward. He had chosen to risk it all, so now, at least, he was free to do anything he wanted, without being controlled. I was so proud and happy for him. I was about to text Eric, but at that moment, the driver pulled up outside of the venue. Since I was the opening act, I had to go get ready first. After the performance, I sat down in the VIP area and grabbed my phone. I saw that Eric's interview had gone down well. Everyone was on his side. There were also some artists who stood up for him. I really hoped the pressure from the public would cause Eric's management company to let him go. And as expected, only 3 days later, news of Eric officially leaving the company was posted online. But he was still not allowed to sing the songs owned by the company, meaning that he would never sing the songs he was known for ever again. It couldn't have been easy for Eric to do this, so I decided to send him a message of support. I wish you all the best. Your talent will win out. I'm sure of it. Then Eric replied,
Thank you, Haley. Your words mean a lot to me.
Later that day, Phil came up to me in the studio and cut straight to the point.
Haley, I have something to ask you. You must have heard Eric's announcement, right? I was just thinking, maybe he could join us at Daystar? I mean, I could persuade Dean to accept him. I think he's talented and has the ability to develop his career. So it's such a waste if no one helps him. What do you think?
Thinking about it, this wasn't a bad idea. Daystar was a small record studio, so they didn't have to mind the interference from big-shot companies like Will's. In response to my silence, Phil immediately said,
But of course, this is only if you're okay with it.
I forced myself to speak. No, yeah, it's fine. Of course. I mean, Eric's a gifted person who was manipulated by his boss. He didn't deserve that. So yeah, we could help him start over. A week passed by. Then one morning, as I was walking to the studio, I saw Phil by the door. He grinned at me and said,
Hey, Hale, want to hear some good news?
Smiling, I replied, Sure, I'm always open to hearing some of that.
Dean made Eric an offer, and he accepted. He's signing the contract today. I mean, he's had to sell his property so he could compensate his previous company for leaving, but Daystar has agreed to contribute toward it.
I followed Phil towards Dean's office in silence. I was happy for Eric, but it was a lot to take in. I can honestly say I never saw this coming, but I guess it made perfect sense now in this situation. When we arrived, I saw Eric signing the contract. The scene took me back to the day Phil and I began our careers with Daystar. And now look at us. We'd come so far, and I knew that Eric could grow here too. Phil looked at me and said,
I promised to help him compose a few new songs to get him back on the musical path. But that means delaying our album for a bit. I'm okay with that. But are you?
I paused to think this through. Then I replied, It's okay. As much as I want to finish our album, I know it can wait. Eric needs this. I leaned on the wall as I looked over at a beaming Eric. He had a lot of hard work ahead of him, but this was hopefully the start of something amazing. 3 months passed, and Eric's new music video was released on our company channel. It was a massive hit, and he regained a lot of his former fan base, along with some new supporters. As for our album, well, it was released 4 months later. Turns out, it was worth the wait, as it was well received and helped us to gain in popularity. I was living my dream life. Sometimes, I still had to pinch myself to prove that it was real. This sounds like the end of my story, right? I mean, I finally achieved my dream to be a professional singer. But I'm not finished just yet. There's just one more thing I need to tell you about, and it concerns, yep, you guessed it, Eric. Since he joined Daystar, we became friends again, but it didn't go beyond that. We were both so busy with work and had so much history. I don't know, it just seemed easier to leave it at that. Sometimes I caught him looking at me, and I found myself wondering if he still had feelings for me. Then I reminded myself of how he'd treated me in the past. Could I ever trust him again? But then something happened, and it changed everything. My schedule had been crazy busy, so I often came home late. That's when I noticed the same car following me home. Then, when I looked out of my window, I'd see that blue car parked up outside. It stayed there the whole night, and sometimes, when I looked through the window, I could see this guy smoking and looking up at my apartment. I loved my fans, but this guy wasn't like my regular sweet fans that wanted selfies and hugs. No, his creepy behavior was freaking me out. So, I hired a bodyguard so I'd feel safe. It worked, as the stalker hasn't shown up since. But one evening, I was at a concert after party when my bodyguard said he had a family emergency and he had to go. He told me he would ring his colleague up and arrange for him to take me home. But then Eric, who was standing near, said,
"Haley, I can take you home."
"Oh, I don't want to bother you," I flustered.
"Well, I don't mind. I'd feel better knowing you got home safely,"
Eric quickly said. I didn't want to be waiting around ages for a bodyguard I didn't know to show up, so I agreed. Besides, I hadn't seen the stalker in weeks, so I'd be fine, right? Wrong, as that night, my stalker showed up. On the way back, Eric noticed a car that seemed to be following us. I nervously turned to look back and realized it was that blue Chevrolet that has been haunting me for months. It's the stalker! Oh no! Why now? I gave Eric directions for a shortcut back to mine, hoping this would confuse the stalker. It seemed to work, as I couldn't see his car anymore. Then Eric said,
"Haley, are you okay? Please don't worry. I won't let anything happen to you."
In the moment of danger, hearing his words like that made my heart skip a beat. I felt truly safe by his side. When he pulled up outside of my place, there was no sign of the stalker's car. Still, Eric insisted on walking me to my door. Suddenly, a figure jumped up out of the shadows and grabbed Eric, then threatened him with a weapon. I didn't know what to do. It was horrible. Then the stalker yelled,
"Haley, I love you! You belong with me, not him! Come with me now, else he'll die!"
My voice was shaking as I said back, "No, please, I'll come with you. Please let him go." But then Eric yelled out,
"Haley, go inside!"
Then before I had time to process what he just said, he elbowed the stalker in the ribs and was tackling him to the ground. In a panic, I ran over and helped Eric by hitting the stalker with my purse. Fortunately, the bad guy passed out. Eric immediately went to check on me, asking if I was okay, as I quickly pulled my phone out to call the police. But the moment I looked up, I saw the stalker was no longer on the ground. He was charging up towards us with the weapon in his hand. Oh no, he's gonna hurt Eric! And without a second thought, without a moment to spare, I pushed Eric to the side and spread my arms out to cover him as I screamed, "Watch out!" And the stalker ended up hurting me.
No, Haley! I'm sorry! I didn't mean to! I love you!
The stalker said in a frenzy before he ran off. Eric rushed over to me and hugged me tightly. The last thing I saw before I passed out was his teary eyes looking down on me. The next time I opened my eyes, I looked around. It looked like the hospital. I was still alive. There was a sharp pain from my shoulder, and I noticed it was all bandaged up. I turned my head. Then I saw Eric asleep in the chair next to me. Turns out, I loved Eric so much that I was willing to sacrifice my own life for his. And turns out that he loved me so much that he was willing to sacrifice his for mine. Thinking about it, over the years, I'd always been torn between my love and faith for him. But now I knew which was more important. I coughed a few times, and he began to wake up. Groggily, he looked at me and said,
Haley, you're awake. Stay there. I'll get the doctor.
With my good arm, I pulled him back. Wait, Eric, you're not hurt, right? Did they catch him? Eric nodded.
Yeah, the cops found him a few blocks away in hysterics, as he thought he'd killed you.
Then in a serious voice, he said,
Haley, why did you do that? You could have died.
I looked at him as I replied, Eric, I'm sorry. In the past, I hurt you with my words, and I didn't believe you. But then, in that moment, I realized that I still love you. I couldn't watch you die. I started to choke up and burst into tears. Then Eric leaned in to kiss me. OMG. I hadn't felt warm and safe like this for such a long time. Then he let go, looked at me and said,
Haley, I love you too.
So, in the end, I realized that I deserved to be happy. And for me, I knew this meant I had to find a way of forgiving Eric and trusting him again. The road to fame has not been an easy one. I loved, I lost, and I faced rejection. But I never gave up. And even though I've had help and support from my amazing friends and family along the way, it was down to me to find the will to rise above the hard times and come out of them stronger than ever. If you have a dream, then be brave. Never give up. And above all else, follow your heart.